Colleagues and friends, I have the pleasure of introducing part 1 of this important book on sustainable food and agriculture, entitled Food and Agriculture at a Crossroads. Over the past century, enormous progress has been made improving human health worldwide. Societies have changed radically thanks to quantum leaps in technology, rapid urbanization, and innovations in production systems. Yet, situations today are far from the world free of fear and want envisioned by the founders of the United Nations. Amid great plenty, billions of people still face pervasive poverty, growth inequalities, joblessness, disease, and deprivation. Future, much of humanity's progress has come at a considerable cost to the environment. The impact of climate change are already being felt and will intensify considerably in the years ahead if we do not take an action. While globally integrated production processes have brought many benefits, outcomes have not always been equitable and sustainable. At the current trends, today's agricultural food system is unlikely to be able to achieve SDG 2 to end hunger and all forms of malnutrition, or meet the needs of growing global population in an environmentally sustainable manner. Significant transformative changes are needed in the agri-food system to achieve a world without hunger and malnutrition and protect natural resource space needed to feed present and future generations. Part 1 of this volume contains 8 chapters addressing key questions regarding the sustainability of agri-food systems across various dimensions. Rather than offer a manual of solutions, it seeks to enhance the understanding of the challenges facing agri-food systems. While the international community has recognized the challenges and the interdependencies between them, as shown in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, significant work is required to achieve policy coherence. As we conclude in the introduction to part 1 of the book, the challenges are complex, and the outcomes of interventions will be uncertain. Keeping political commitment and focus will also be difficult. Integrating actions to achieve multiple and linked objectives will pose new technical demands on policymakers. To meet these demands, more and better data and research will be needed. Policies will need new data and impact assessments to monitor their effectiveness and to provide the necessary accountability. Moreover, research will be critical to understand how food systems can address emerging issues, including climate change, inequality, youth employment, migration, and conflict. It will also be very critical to better understand how the accelerated pace of technological innovations to help make agri-food systems sustainable. Food and agriculture are at a crossroads, and so is our food policy research. So we will need to drastically shift gears to transform agri-food system for human and planetary health. We hope this work will help doing so. Thank you.
As Sharon mentioned, at current trends and with current food systems, it seems unlikely that SDG 2 can be achieved not by 2030 and not by the end of the century. This is the first major finding of part 1. Global food demand is expected to increase by 50% between 2012 and 2050. This would not seem a great challenge if history is a guide. Food production more than tripled in previous decades. However, demand has shifted towards more resource-intensive food, such as animal-sourced foods, fruits, vegetables, and processed foods. This will put added pressure on already scarce land, soil, and water resources, and degrade the quality of these resources further. Hence, ending hunger and all forms of malnutrition by 2030, or even by 2050, would be nothing but an elusive target if current trends continue. The second main finding is that much of the attention in transforming food systems should focus on Africa. Africa's population is expected to quadruple from 1 billion to over 4 billion by the end of the century. The region's slow economic transformation means that at going trends, Africa will be home to the vast majority of the world's poor by 2050. Despite growing urbanization, the key challenge remains in developing the agricultural sector and creating income opportunities throughout the food system. Since many downstream processing and trading activities are in towns and cities, promoting future poverty reduction will require greater alignment between agricultural and urban policies. Third, climate change is already affecting food security in many developing countries. It is expected to affect ever more people in more areas in the future, unless actions are taken beginning today. Available sustainable intensification technologies and practices can help farmers both adapt to and mitigate climate change impacts. Such technologies can also help reduce food insecurity. For example, the number of food insecure people in developing countries could be reduced in 2050 by 12%, or almost 124 million people, if nitrogen efficient crop varieties were widely in use, and by 9%, or 91 million people, if no-till farming were more widely adopted. However, realizing these gains requires increased investment in research and support measures to help smallholders adopt climate-smart practices. Fourth, water availability for agriculture will become a growing constraint. Severe water scarcity is a main challenge for many smallholders in Asia and Africa. Fortunately, promising agricultural water management investment options exist to address the water scarcity challenge. Important hurdles will need to be overcome, however, to make these accessible to smallholder farmers. Fifth, agriculture is a significant contributor to deforestation, biodiversity loss, and greenhouse gas emissions. It means that agricultural growth, food security, and forest preservation are currently conspiring against each other. We need better planning to develop productive landscapes that incorporate trees and forests. It is essential to protect the ecosystem services upon which agricultural production depends. The sixth and related finding is that degradation of water resources, land and soils should be addressed simultaneously. In most countries, this is not happening and impeding sustainable use of those resources. So existing governance mechanisms will need to change to achieve greater coordination between land, water, and soil management. 7. We should be very worried about the severe loss of biodiversity caused by deforestation, changes in land use, intensive use of natural resources, and the impacts of climate change. Presently, no more than 30 crops provide 95% of human food energy needs. 4 crops alone, rice, wheat, maize, and potato, are responsible for more than 60% of our energy intake. High genetic diversity within these crops needs to be preserved to avoid putting food security further at risk. Also, diversely structured landscapes are crucial in supporting environmental services that maintain the productivity and the stability of ecosystems. 8, and last but not least, food systems are changing with growing reliance on modern, global supply chains and large-scale distribution systems. The changes are driven in part by urbanization, a rising global urban middle class, and related changes in food demand and dietary preferences. We're eating much more processed foods and more often using food services on streets, in restaurants, and through home delivery. Rapid technological innovation, especially in information and communication technologies and mechanization, is another major driving force of food system changes. In developing countries, the development from traditional to modern food systems is generating mixed outcomes in terms of food security and nutrition, rural employment, and poverty reduction. Many trade-offs have emerged between food system efficiency, sustainability, and inclusiveness. Direct interventions to address such trade-offs in one part of the system thus may risk exacerbating problems in another. Part 1 of the book concludes, therefore, that agriculture and food policy should take a food system-wide approach in order to be effective. In sum, these are 8 major challenges threatening the sustainability of global food systems. The biggest challenge of all, however, is that these will need to be addressed together and with great urgency. If we don't, the future of our food security will be at great risk.